Good afternoon, everybody. Before I start, I would thank MIIS and the Department of East Asian Studies to provide this opportunity to address to you my view on Japan's lack of diversity. I hope you are anxious to hear my talk because I am anxious too. I've never talked about this topic before, and my PowerPoint was ready about 5 minutes ago. So everybody, I hope, including me, is anxious to hear this talk. Before start, I want to introduce a little bit about myself. I'm not a Japan specialist. I'm more specialist on Southeast Asia, especially Indonesia and Malaysia. Indonesia, I carried out studies among Minangkabau of West Sumatra. Then, is it okay? Do I need microphone? Is it okay? Okay. No. You need? I need. I carried out research in among the Minangkabau West Sumatra, and also there are Minangkabau descendants in the province of Riau, next to West Sumatra. In Malaysia itself, I carried research among Negeri Sembilan people. So these are all connected. They are all Minangkabau related. Although I'm not a Japan specialist, I have some on connections with Japan studies, as it is shown here. Now, there's so many chapters in my talk, I think you might be afraid that it will go more than 1 hour. I hope I won't. First, I will talk about Japan as a homogeneous nation. How many of you think Japan is a very homogeneous nation, culturally and ethnically? Please raise your hand. Okay, maybe some people are maru-maru, yeah? Then I will talk about how Japan's homogeneity has been discussed, discourse. Then how this Japan's supposedly the homogeneous nation could have contributed to the socio-economic development of Japan. Then particular socio-economic landscape which allowed Japan's success in economy. But now in the 21st century, so-called Japan's homogeneity is at a crossroad. What kind of problem do we have? And to think about this problem, I will focus on 2 elements of Japan's society. One is women, and the other is immigrants. Then at the end, there will be a concluding remark. Japan and the question of homogeneity. It is often said that Japan is an ethnically and culturally homogeneous. Well, it is easy to say Japan is a homogeneous nation, but homogeneity is actually a matter of degree and also a matter of discourse. Discourse is a formal discussion of a subject. It is indeed homogeneous compared to, say, Malaysia. Japan is homogeneous compared to Malaysia or United States, but perhaps not so homogeneous compared to, say, North Korea. Related to the matter of degree, it is difficult to define homogeneity in either ethnic or cultural terms. And if it is difficult to define, then it is almost impossible to measure the degree of homogeneity. One means of solving this problem is using the population census if census includes questions which deal with homogeneity or diversity. Now, in Japan's case, the Meiji government initiated the family register system. We called it koseki in 1872. So Meiji Restoration was 1868. So 4 years later, there was some kind of population register. And this register recorded demographic and genealogical information about its citizens nationwide. So before Meiji, Japan was divided into over 200 han, or fiefdoms. So after Meiji, for the first time, the government tries to the total idea about the population of Japan. But it was not until 1920 that the first census, that is a collection of information about individual citizens, so not about households, but individual citizens, was conducted in Japan. Actually, before 1920, there were plans to carry out census, but it couldn't be done because there was the outbreak of the Russo-Japanese War, 1904 and 1905, and World War I, 1914 and 1918, which were in the way of carrying out the actual census. Okay, it's okay. Now, this is a very interesting thing. Japan's census does not ask about the ethnicity or religion of those counted. And this lack of information about ethnicity or religion in census is an exception among modern nation states. Now, I don't know why Japan, even up to now, have no information about ethnicity or religion of the population. However, the 1920 census classified the population into the following categories. People of Japan proper, in Japanese called Naichi, so Naichi-jin, including Hokkaido's former aborigines, Kyu Dojin, Ainu people. Dojin referred to Ainu at that time. Ainu are like this. Second category is peoples of Japan colonies and mandate. At that time, 1920, Japan had colonized Taiwan and Korea and Sakhalin in the north of Hokkaido and South Seas in the South Sea islands like Solomon Island and so forth. So those people are counted in the census too. The third category is foreigners. About 24 countries, foreign countries of people are counted, and also there are so many foreign countries, so rest is categorized other foreign countries. People of Japan's colonies and mandate are not ethnic categories, but categories derived from the names of colonies and mandate. For example, it was not Korean people, but people of Korea. Now, a little bit more about Japan as a colonial empire. The Japan of 1920, when the first census was conducted, was not the same as the Japan today, as we know. After winning the Sino-Japanese War and the Russo-Japanese War, Japan was a colonial empire by 1920, when the first census was taken. So in this map, you can see the territory of Japanese empire in 1920. One is Naichi, or mainland Japan, or Japan proper. 2, Taiwan. 3, Sakhalin. 4, Korea. 5, Quantum lease territory. So it's not Japan's own territory, but it was controlled by Japan. Likewise, South Manchuria Railway Zone. 7 is the mandated islands. This was formerly colonized by German, but because Germany lost the war in World War I, this control was entrusted to Japan as a mandated territory. This is the French cartoon showing the giant killing. Sort of Japan won the war against giant Qing dynasty. By omitting ethnicity and religion, Japan's census does not help us find out how homogeneous Japan is, either ethnically or culturally. To complicate matters further, the pre-war Japanese empire and the Japan of today are different in terms of territorial extent and population composition. You can compare two maps underneath. Japan as we know it today was born only after its defeat in the Pacific War. So 1945 was born after the defeat of Japan in the Pacific War. So when we talk about homogeneous Japan, the question arises as to which Japan we have in mind. You have completely different ideas about population, whether you are referring to Japan of 1933 or 20 or Japan of today. Since it is impossible to discuss the degree of Japan's homogeneity in a meaningful way, I will concentrate my talk on the discourse of homogeneity, that is, on how Japan's homogeneity has been discussed. The Japan I focus on is that of post-war Japan, since the discourse of Japan as a homogeneous nation is most dominant after World War II. I will come back to this at the end of my talk. The next two slides introduce two famous scholars, one Japanese and one American, who do not necessarily specialize in discourse analysis. But their most representative and introductory books on Japan, published in the 1960s and 1970s, reflect the Japan as a homogeneous nation theory, showing how dominant the homogeneity discourse is now. You see, they are not the discourse analysis specialists. Nevertheless, their writings have the element of Japan as a homogeneous nation theory. One is a Japanese social anthropologist called Nakane Chie, and his book in Japanese titled Tate Shakai no Ningen Kankei. This was published in 1967. This book characterized human relations in Japan as those of a society that is hierarchically and vertically structured. It was translated into English and published as the Japanese Society in 1970. For many years, both Japanese and English books were sort of must reading for understanding Japanese society. According to Nakane, there is probably no other country in the world with such a high degree of homogeneity. She uses the Japanese term tanitse or uniformity as Japan. The Japanese archaeology, she says, was inhabited by an overwhelming majority of one ethnic group who shared the basic cultural traits, apparently including the vertical nature of human relations. In Japanese, joge kankei. The second person is American historian Edwin O. Reischauer and his book called Japanese, The Japanese. In 1977, Reischauer, he was a Harvard professor of Japanese history and culture, and he was former U.S. ambassador to Japan, appointed during the time of Kennedy administration. He published a comprehensive introductory book on the Japanese, literally titled The Japanese. It can be seen as a revised and updated version of Ruth Benedict's The Chrysanthemum and the Sword, written by a Japanese specialist. You see, Benedict was never a Japanese specialist, never visited Japan either. Written by a Japanese specialist with a focus on contemporary Japanese, including some historical elements. In it, he writes, Japanese society is remarkable, if anything, for its homogeneity, orderliness, and adherence to strict patterns. Though constantly changing, it remains thoroughly and distinctly Japanese. This is his book. I don't know if everybody knows what's going on on the front page of front cover of the book. This is the New Year homage paid to the probably Meiji Shrine in Tokyo. Oops. How do I go back? Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Thus, both Nakane and Reischauer find a high degree of uniformity and homogeneity in Japanese people and culture. They believe that this homogeneity is historically rooted and reinforced by the educational and organizational cultures of contemporary Japan. Reischauer observes, all Japanese have had 12 years or at minimum 9 years of virtually identical education, and they emerge into society with a uniformity of information and attitudes that is only matched in a small, close-knit, primitive society or a modern totalitarian state. I was really shocked to read this part. But it's not completely off the mark. Either explicitly or implicitly, they also suggest that the homogeneity was conducive to Japan's rapid economic development after World War II. Homogeneity in the form of discipline, group orientation, and a strong work ethic, if infused into labor force, should be a powerful asset for economic development. It can also be useful in ensuring consensus cooperation, solidarity, and loyalty. The famous QC, Quality Control Circle, and Kaizen improvement on the factory floor were realized, certainly because of the homogeneity as understood above. A Japanese social commentator once said that Japanese education seeks to produce human resources that are persistent, cooperative, and possess common knowledge and skills, echoing Reischauer's biting characterization of Japanese education. What Reischauer and this social commentator is trying to say is Japanese education produces Kintaro Ame. Kintaro Ame is this one. Kintaro is this one, the boy of the children's story. And this kind of ame is very traditional. And this is the Kintaro's face. But the artisan shokunin, who makes this ame, can create a lot of variations like this. These are also made in the same way as Kintaro ame. So Japanese education, Reischauer and the social commentator are saying that no matter, this is a stick of candy, no matter where you cut the candy, you will see the same face. It's such a compliment, I don't know. 50 years ago, when Reischauer or Nakane wrote those two books, the Japanese population was still growing, and the percentage of people over 65 was less than 10%, I think around 8%. If it goes beyond 7%, that society is called aging society. This demographic situation made it easy to maintain the seniority system and lifetime employment. So famous two Japanese employment practices. The source of wealth was tangible assets, such as goods and factories. The mainstay of economy was the manufacture of heavy and large industrial products such as steel and ships, and later automobiles and electronic and electrical equipment. These are all taken over by Korea and Taiwan and China. The QC cycle and Kaizen supported by homogeneity were effective in improving productivity in the economy of tangible assets. So as long as economy is based on tangible assets, homogeneity worked okay. So now comes the problem. Global socioeconomic landscape began to change in mid-1990s and this century. Japan's bubble economy first burst in 1999. The land prices fell. 1995, stock prices fell. In the 1990s, the phenomenon of Japan's declining birth rate and aging population became more apparent. Meanwhile, the global socio-economic and technological landscape began to change too. Intangible assets such as knowledge and information began to emerge as a new source of wealth. They become obsolete much faster than tangible assets. There is more room for startups in the area of intangible assets which do not necessarily require investment in plant and equipment. So this is the reason why we hear so much about startups and entrepreneurs. That was not the case during the age of the economy of tangible goods. The end of Cold War and the birth of WTO in 1995 ushered in the age of economic globalization. This is the rate of Japan's declining birth rate. This part is the babies, and this part is population over 65, and this is the percentage of old population among the total population. So you can see around 1990s, sort of this goes down quickly, and the aged population goes up quickly. This economic globalization can be seen in this graph. World exports of goods and services. So around this time is WTO. Around this time is the end of the Cold War, and around this time is the formation of WTO. So it's amazing how much and how fast the world export of goods and services multiplied. Now the global socioeconomic landscape has beginning to change. Japan's homogeneity is now at a crossroad. An old Japanese proverb says, "The stake that sticks out will be driven down. Deru kui wa utareru." This proverb goes back to the 16th century, quite old. Another more recent expression is KY, kuki o yomu, or reading the air of the situation. Well, these sayings reflect conformist attitudes. And these attitudes, which are negative side of homogeneity, do not encourage individuality, originality, or creativity, the qualities most needed in the 21st century. This century has already seen the development of ICT, online commerce, platform business, electric cars, robotics, biotechnology, AI, and so on, just in the span of 23 years. It's a remarkable development. It is diversity, not homogeneity, that increases the likelihood of enhancing the qualities that led to their invention. Homogeneous Japanese are good at work unit-based Kaizen. This is the 5 or at most 10 work unit get together after the end of the day's work, discuss what kind of problems we may have to be improved to increase the productivity. But not necessarily at more individual-based innovation. Clearly, Japan needs to embrace diversity. Among the various elements that make up contemporary Japanese society, I focus on women and immigrants in the context of Japan's lack of diversity. Women comprise, maybe Mao Zedong said that the women hold the half of the sky. Women comprise half of the population, but their representation in political and economic domains in Japan has been extremely low. This means that the opinions and needs of half of the Japanese population are not well reflected or served in these spheres. Society, Japanese society, does not make good use of their experience, skills, talents, and ideas, which is a great loss for society and for women themselves. With the exception of Korean and Chinese residents in Japanese for short they're called zainichi, the presence of immigrants in post-war Japan was for a long time insignificant. You see, every country, like in Europe, Germany, Italy, France, every country which faced the problem of reconstruction experienced rapid economic development. And rapid economic development needs input of a lot of labor force. That's the reason why West Germany had to import Turks as laborers to Germany. Many of them are still living in Germany. Now, in Japanese case, there are many Japanese came back from like Manchuria, Korea to Japan after the war, and they usually went back to the countryside of their origin. So the lack of labor force in the process of rapid economic development of Japan was supplied by population from the countryside, either seasonal migration or permanent migration. Seasonal migration called dekasegi in Japanese. So these permanent migration and seasonal migration are directed to urban areas and the factory areas. It was only after 1980s, the period of the bubble economy, that the existence of migrants began to emerge as a socioeconomic reality and later as a legal problem in Japan. See, up to that point, Japan didn't have any immigration law because we didn't have to so-called deal with immigrants. So 1980 began to see arrivals of many so-called illegal immigrants or overstayers. They came in on tourist visa and stayed over the limit of allowed length of stay. Interestingly, in the 1980s, can you guess which nationals are most apparent among the immigrants in Japan in 1980s? Anybody guess? Surprise, Iranians and Bangladeshis. You see, I don't know why, but these people are given non-visa status, so they can come in without visa and get a visa at immigration for 3 months. So although it was not yet the period of SNS, but these Iranians and Bangladeshis got the information that you can get into Japan without any visa. And overstaying after 3 months, you could make good money because this was during the bubble economy period. Because of their newness and foreignness, immigrants are the most difficult element to be accepted by homogeneous Japan. However, given Japan's declining birth rate and aging population, immigrants are expected to increase in the future as a source of labor force, something missing, and diverse talents. Immigrants can thus be a critical test case for how open homogeneous Japan can be to diversity. I mean, can homogeneous Japan readjust itself to diversity or not? Paying little attention to women in their books, Nakane and Raishawa's Japanese society seems to consist only of men. Nakane scarcely refers to women in her book. She's a woman, but she doesn't refer to women in her book. There are only 2 mentions of women in her book, 2 footnotes, very short footnotes, that's all. To be fair, Raishawa does devote a 9-page chapter to women, titled Woman, but it consists mainly of references to many restrictions based on their role in society that often stir indignation among Western women, especially among Americans, Raishawa says. It points out, among other things, severe job discrimination, little room for social life for married women, their overwhelmingly subservient position in the broader society outside the family, and so on and so forth. One of the concluding remarks he makes reads, "Women still have a long way to go to achieve social and economic equality, despite the changes that occurred after World War II." I mean, Raishawa recognizes some changes have happened to women's status in Japan after the war, but not much. It has been 46 years since Raishawa's book was published. Notwithstanding significant changes that have occurred since then, his concluding remark, "Women still have a long way to go," still holds true today. The World Economic Forum's Global Gender Gap Report 2023 ranks Japan, surprise, surprise, or not so surprised maybe, 125th out of 146 nations, lower than Myanmar, not to mention the Philippines, Singapore, Thailand, Indonesia, or Malaysia. Malaysia's ranking is relatively low. I think probably it is influenced by the fact that Malaysia is a Muslim majority country, and probably Global Gender Gap Report is negatively biased towards the Muslim majority countries. This is so despite the labor shortage that Japan has been facing for more than 30 years. Women are still underrepresented in middle and top-level positions in business, academia, the bureaucracy, and the national diet, parliament. We haven't had any woman prime minister yet. And as you may know, that present emperor has no son. Emperor's brother, younger brother, has 1 son. And also a number of sons among the imperial family is very small. So we still stick to the regulation that the emperor has to be a man. And there are arguments to change this, to make female imperial family to become an empress. That was during Koizumi's prime ministership. But when the discussion was about to begin, the president, the younger son of the present, younger brother of the present emperor had a son. So the discussion died there. This is the Global Gender Gap Report 2023, and this is the evaluation of Japan's ranking. Ranking is made based on 4 key dimensions: economic participation and opportunity, educational attainment, health and survival, and political empowerment. So Japan is extremely low in political empowerment, and economic participation and opportunity is also low. Education and health are sort of okay. Now, what about present state of immigrants in Japan? As of October last year, there are more than 1,820,000 foreign workers in Japan. Strangely enough, it is really strange. The term immigrant in Japanese called imin does not appear in government documents in Japan. The late Abe Shinzo also expressed that we don't have to have the term imin. The LDP-led government is reluctant to use the term. Around the government quarter and politicians, the conservative politicians, imin still seems to be understood in the sense of those Japanese who permanently emigrated with their families to the United States, like Hawaii and California and Brazil in the late 19th or early 20th century. It seems as if the adoption of the term imin would imply Japan's acceptance of permanent immigrants with their families. That is definitely what LDP politicians do not want to have. As a result, Japan has not had an immigration law until now, even though we have close to 2 million foreign workers in Japan right now. So you can see, even just to take for the last 13 years, the number of foreign workers has increased exponentially, even during the COVID-19 period. And this is the categories of nationals seen among the foreign workers. It used to be like Chinese and Koreans, including the Korean Zainichi residents in Japan, but now it is Vietnam, followed by China, Philippines, Brazil, and so forth. Nepal is also quite a lot here, Nepal. Many Indian restaurants in Japan are opened by Nepalese, and many Nepalese work there. I don't know, you do know about Sento, the public bathhouse? I happen to like Sento very much. And this is a poster I noticed when I went to a Sento near Kyoto Station about 15 years ago. So I asked the owner of the Sento if I can have this poster. And she said yes, so I got it. Now, the interesting about this poster is this is the picture of public telephone. Nowadays, it's very difficult to find public telephone in Japan, but in 1994, when this poster was made, public telephone was very common, of course. And these are the flags of countries for whose people this poster is directed. Americans, I don't think they would come to Sento. But I think just in case people who could read English come, I think they put English here. And Korea, Philippines, China, Taiwan, Brazil. And this poster was sponsored, actually proposed by the telephone company and proposed to the Central Union to put, why don't you put this into your Cento so that foreigners coming to use Cento would understand how to utilize Cento. Like there are so many do and don'ts in this poster. Now, can you guess why? Oh, by the way, these are the Korea, Philippines, China, Taiwan, Brazil are the countries which sent many immigrants or foreign workers around 1994. Can you guess why telephone company proposed and sponsored the printing of this poster? Any good guess? Okay, this was before the age of smartphone, handphone. So these migrants from foreign workers from these countries have to use the public phone to call back their families at home. So that's the reason why this telephone company proposed to sponsor this poster. This is a more recent poster of 2002, and this only have in Japanese and English. This one has different countries and languages. And this is mainly, I think, mostly directed to, I think, inbound foreigners who are curious to experience Cento. So those inbound foreigners were the main target of this poster. So Japan does not have migrants. We only have foreign workers. Instead of immigrants, Japan began accepting trainees under the technical intern training program, Gino Jishu Seido, which was introduced in 1993. So this is a sort of trick of the term and trick of the system. In fact, they are migrants, but they are not called migrants. Trainees were allowed to stay in Japan for a certain number of years. No family was allowed, and there was no freedom to choose a training location. Apart from foreign experts, the acceptance of foreign workers has been carried out by basically revising and adjusting the technical intern training program. So even now, no immigration law. There was once a LDP Diet Member Caucus founded in 2005 to promote the exchange of foreign human resources. At the end of 2008, this caucus was discussing a draft proposal to accept approximately 10 million immigrants over the next 50 years, drastically reduce requirements for permanent residence permits, and establish even an immigration agency. Isn't this surprising? That was about 15 years ago. There was such a movement among LDP. However, the committee has since disbanded. No such committee exists despite the pressing labor shortage. Compared to 2008, the labor shortage intensified now. I mean, we need more than ever this kind of a draft proposal, but not yet. As the case of immigrants suggests, there is an urgent need to address the issue of diversity politically. However, LDP-led government suffers from political inertia and maintains the status quo. I think this is related to the increasing right-wing swing among LDP Diet members over the past decade or so, especially under the leadership of the late Abe Shinzo. And behind this movement is the existence of Nihon Kaigi, Japan Conference. If you look at the Wikipedia in English, Japan Conference, the Japan Conference is described. I should have pasted the description here. Japan Conference is described as ultra-nationalist, ultra-rightist, Tuma Ultra, NGO and lobbying group. And Abe supported this group, and this group supported Abe strongly. The right-wing swing reflects the growing influence of the discourse of homogeneity. This, like Japan Conference, adopt this discourse of homogeneity. They want to strengthen the position of emperor. They want to change constitution so that officially Japan can have a military and so forth. Also, this discourse of homogeneity emphasizes the imperial system and traditional family system, sort of subservient wife, following the order of husband, filial piety to parents, and loyalty to the emperor kind of thing. Let me cite an extreme case of Sugita Mio. Sugita Mio, born in 1967, is a member of the lower house of Japan's Diet. Lower house is more important than upper house. After working as a town hall employee, she started her political career in 2012 as a member of an opposition party. He stood for the general election but didn't win at the time. However, she stood for the 2017 general election as an LDP candidate and elected. Reportedly, the late Abe regarded highly her denial of the existence of comfort women. She said she is famous for making all kinds of what is it in English term? Outrageous comments on many things. And her denial of comfort woman is there was no comfort woman. Those are all voluntary prostitutes. There was no forced comfort woman and so forth. And Abe liked that her statement and recruited her as an LDP candidate. This is reported. I don't know how much it is true. Now, these two caricatures show two examples of her outrageous comments. The one here says, women can tell lies as much as possible. She said this when there was a regulation, new regulation, saying that woman's raped victim, woman's statement that I was raped, could be accepted as evidence of rape. So after this regulation was passed, this was what she said. Hey, wait, women tell lies as she won't. So you cannot trust a woman's statement that she was raped. And this one said, gender equality cannot be realized, ever. It is the immoral delusion. It won't be realized. So mass media, of course, criticized her. There are so many other statements she made. And tell LDP to dismiss her from the diet. But LDP never does that. The Prime Minister Kishida now says that, I think we shouldn't discriminate. But the statement was made by Sugita. So she should be the one who would give the explanation, not me. Discourse is a discourse. It changes. This is a very important point. These two maps are already shown before. Japanese Empire of 1933 and Japan of after 1945, or Japan of today. So this area once part of Japanese Empire. I was thinking that there aren't many cases where countries lose a lot of territories because of the defeat in a war. Maybe like Ottoman Empire, maybe Mexico, after fighting against the US in the 19th century. I think there are a few others. And Japan is one of them. And I was born during the war, and I was not so, I don't know this map as a child. So Japan becoming this is not such a shock to me. But I can see to the older generation that Japan they used to know like this, becoming this must be a great shock. And occupied by the United States after the war. So how to cope with this shock? And now China surpassed Japan in GDP. I think Japan's GDP is twice that of Japan now. And last week, Germany surpassed Japan in GDP. So US, China, Germany, number 4, Japan. Many things are happening. So going back to the who are Nihonjin or Japanese in the two maps, are they the same Nihonjin? Of course they are not the same. They must be different. This is the quote from a book, A Road to Social Integration, published by Ministry of Education. And it is cited in Oguma Eiji's book, A Genealogy of Japanese Self-Image, published by, I think, 2002 or 2002 or 2007. But there is an earlier original Japanese version was published in 1995. Surprising that Japanese version was his master's thesis. Just amazing. So this quote says, Japanese nation did not originally emerge as an homogeneous nation. Rather, it was formed in ancient times through a fusion and assimilation into the Japanese nation of aboriginal people, that is Ainu, and those who came from the continent, and was formed through the cultivation of a strong belief that all were members of the same nation under the imperial family. So guess what? This doesn't say Japan is a homogeneous nation. So guess when this book, A Road to Social Integration, was published by Ministry of Education? Anybody? Obviously not after the war, right? It was published in 1942, in the middle of the war. So the discourse of homogeneity we are so familiar with actually became dominant only after World War II. One W is missing. This is one way to cope, I think, with the loss of colonial territories due to the defeat of war, and somehow trying to recover the dignity or pride, Japan as a nation. And of course, before the war, we had Korea, Sakhalin, Taiwan as colonies, so the term Japanese covered people of those colonies too. And there is a famous wartime slogan, 100 million Japanese becoming a single fireball fighting against the Allied forces. So where does this 100 million Japanese come from? During the wartime, Japanese only numbered 700 million. No, not seven. 70万だから、70 million, only 70 million was the Japanese of Naichi, of Japan proper. 30 million were people living in Korea, Taiwan, and so forth, in Japan's colony. So that slogan, 100 million Japanese becoming a single fireball, attacking or fighting against Allied forces, already includes Koreans, Taiwanese, and so forth as part of the Japanese at the time. Well, what is the point of this talk? Well, this is the one I was working on 10 minutes before this session started, so it is not well cooked yet, half cooked. Respecting diversity means to pay attention to the voice of the minority, either quantitatively, that is in terms of numbers, or qualitatively, like women, as well as that of the majority. The majority tends to be conservative and wants to maintain the status quo where they are the majority. If anything, majority hopes to enlarge their rights and privileges within the status quo. The minority, who is not necessarily happy with the status quo, tends to have opinions about how to change the status quo. Thus, new ideas and suggestions are more likely to come from the minority than from the majority. In the 21st century, when changes are exceedingly rapid, we need more than ever to embrace diversity. So this is where wisdom of democracy comes in. How are we going to realize this without fighting, erupting between majority and minority? Thank you very much.